In today's video, we're going to be building one of the best budget quadcopters you can possibly purchase on the market. We're using the best budget components from iFlight's EcoStack to iFlight's frame. Rush FPV isn't that budget, but your video transmitter usually is a pretty big deal, and I'm really starting to love these, so that's why I picked up another one, which we'll be using for this. And I'll also have some cheaper variants linked down below, and again, everything here is linked down below. So this is going to be a beginner's guide. I'm going to give you some tips and tricks into soldering, what tools I'm using, and how to get going as easy as possible, and some of the techniques I use in order to keep my overall build process very simple, straightforward, and also make my life a lot easier. So before we begin, let's talk about some of the components here that we're using. Right now we're using this iFlight EcoStack. Now when I say a stack, or whenever you hear a stack usually means the flight controller and the ESC, and those come together. And what's really nice when you buy a combo stack, you don't really have to worry about the connection between the ESC to the flight controller, because it'll give you this ribbon cable that'll connect from here to here, and it'll do all those connections for you, which is really great. Now also, this stack right here from iFlight goes for around 40 bucks, and it is an insane deal, and anybody would agree with me. And I've used this so far on 3 builds or 3 or 4 quadcopters I've used this on a 6S and 4S, which is insane here. So this is the stack we're going to be using for this build. And what's really nice is they provide you with every single thing you're going to need, from the connectors to the Xt60 to the low ESR capacitor, which will be installed, and I'll show you how to install. And what's really nice also, they even provide you a cable that'll actually connect right into this exact video transmitter without needing to solder to it. So it's going to be one of the easiest builds we've done on the channel so far, which is a huge plus here. Now for frame, we're using the all new iFlight SL5. This is kind of like the XL5, however, it's a squashed X. That means it's not a true X or a stretched X, it's squashed. And I haven't flown this one just yet, and this is going to be my test setup for testing this frame. Usually these iFlight frames are really great on default beta flight PIDs, and I'm really hoping that's the case again with this frame. And again, we'll see that once we take it out flying. Now for motors, these are considered the best budget motors. These are $11 motors. They're the Emax Ecos 2207-2400 kV. I'll have a couple different variants of KVs linked down below as well. These are really great. On my thrust testing, which I've done a couple days ago, I found them to be the most efficient, and they have a lot of power, and it's just going to give you an overall great experience, in my opinion, from the results that I've gotten. And this is why I chose to put them on here. For camera, we're going to keep it very tiny. We're going to be using the RunCam Nano. I'll have this one linked down below. It's pretty cheap. It's not that cheap, but what's really nice, it's going to save a lot of weight. There's really no need to save that much weight, but I have this laying around. I really want to put it on a big build, and that's what we're going to be setting up on this. As you can tell, it comes with this adapter in order to fit into this frame, which is a huge plus here. Now for video transmitter, we're going to be using the Rush FPV Ultimate Plus. I am really starting to love these video transmitters from Rush FPV. This is one of the best video transmitter companies out there you can possibly purchase from. They range from $20 up to $34. You can choose whatever you want. I also have some cheaper variants linked down below, but this is going to make our whole life and build so much easier, since it's really just out of the box compatible with the connector that is provided with the stack here, and that's going to give you less headache here, which is always, again, a huge plus here. For receiver, I'm going to be using an RXSR. Usually I use XM Pluses, but I ran out and I had this one laying around. This one's a little bit more expensive than an XM Plus, but an XM Plus will do exactly the same thing. But again, I always prefer the XM Plus. I'm just using this because this is what I have laying around. Now for tools, I'd highly recommend you pick up the TS100. You can use this as your primary soldering iron. It is a beast, and not only that, it's also portable. So in the field, just stick in any battery up to a 6S, and you'll just start soldering in the field. And I always carry this with me. However, for this video, we're not going to be using it because I can't find the connector for the wall adapter, basically, because it doesn't come with one. So I can't find its adapter, but I've done many builds on the channel with this before, and it's highly recommended. And this thing used to be 90 bucks, and again, now it's like $40. So definitely recommended to pick one of these up. You are not going to be let down, and it is one of the best portable soldering irons out there. For cutters, I'm going to be using this cutter. I got it from Banggood. You could use any cutter you want. And also this right here, this is the RJX. This is really nice because it comes with every single head you need to work on any quadcopter, whether it's a micro, 5-inch, 6-inch, or 7-inch. They give you 1.5 millimeter all the way up to 3 millimeter, and in the middle increments. So we're going to be just using the 2 millimeter here and the 1.5. The 1.5 is going to be for the camera screws, 2 millimeter for everything on the quadcopter. So this is really great, and it's also really good to take in the field with you because it doesn't take that much space. And also some tweezers are going to be great as well. So let's get started. So the first step I always like to approach any build is first prepare all the wires. Usually I strip them out, twist them, and add some solder to them just to have them ready to make the overall process much simpler. So I have my camera ready, and I also have my receiver ready. Video transmitter again is pretty awesome because we're just going to use the connector that was provided and just going to stick here and stick here, so we're not going to need to solder. So really we're only going to need to solder two things to the flight control, which is just the receiver and the camera, and that is insane. So it's going to be a really quick build here. So the first thing we want to start off with, what I like to start off with, is the receiver. Now I'm using an FRSky. Now this is very important because FRSky uses S-Bus, and on an F4 microcontroller unit, it has to go to a specific pad. And let me explain what do I mean. Now for the S-Bus on an F4, it needs to be on something called an inverted pad. And usually the documentation of the flight control will tell you. And here it's going to be the NR2. The N is standing for inverted. So we're going to put our iBus signal right here. We're also going to put our ground here and the red wire here, which is the 5 volt. So power and then signal. Now, if you had an iBus receiver with the same build, what you want to do is you're going to want to go to an R pad, which is not the NR2 here. So for example, you would want to put it on R2 if you're using Spectrum or iBus. This is where you would put it, and you'd still put the 5 volt here in the ground, and Spectrum is usually 3.3 volts, so 3.3 volt, and you could put your signal here for Spectrum, then you give it ground from anywhere. So let's go ahead and start preparing every single pad we're going to need. So we're going to need the NR2, which is going to be this pad right here, hopefully, if I could see that. You might want to keep it here for a little bit because sometimes what you have is some kind of conformal coating, which kind of makes it water resistant. And you might just need to keep the soldering iron there for a tiny bit longer in order for you to remove that conformal coating. We're also going to need 5 volt, which is this one here. Now the way that I add solder is I would go on the pad, just heat it up, just make sure I'm on there. And then I just come in, add a little solder, just move it a little bit, and boom, we got a really nice solder joint right there. We want to see them shiny, just like this. So the next thing we need is the ground, which is this one here. We already got some solder on there. Now grounds, usually you need to keep the soldering iron slightly longer because the ground plane is all over the board and it kind of dissipates the heat all over the board. So usually you need to hold that down a little bit longer with your soldering iron. So here's our receiver. Next thing we're going to need to solder is just one more thing, which is going to be the camera, because the connector is going to work for the video transmitter here. Now we're going to need to find V in, VI, which is video input, 5 volt in ground. So this is where our camera is going to be soldered right there. So I'm going to go ahead and add some solder to this as well. There we go. And there we go. And always keep the tip clean also. For example, you don't want your soldering iron tip to be black. You want it to be as shiny as possible, kind of like this here. That's going to allow the heat to transfer much better. All right, so right now I'm going to grab my receiver and I'm just going to go ahead and start installing it. So we're going to see what we need first. So right now 5 volt is going to be the easiest to start soldering to. So let's go ahead and set that up. And if you're right-handed, it's always better to start from the left side and move to the right. This way you don't risk bumping into anything. So for example, I'm going to solder this one, then I move to this one. But if I started from the right here, since I'm right-handed, and then I went to this one, I have a high chance of hitting this right there. So right now we have our 5 volt, and on the bottom here we have the ground. So as you can tell, the ground took slightly longer to melt, unlike the others. That's because of the ground plane on the board. So usually grounds will take slightly more heat or more time to get them to solder. And then here is going to be our signal for the S-Bus. So there we go. So now our receiver is connected here, and you could twist these. These are silicone wires. I remember back then we never really got these silicone wires, but now it's like a standard. If you don't get silicone wires, then the packaging, the whole thing is a piece of crap. So this is really nice. Everything is silicone here. Let's go ahead and grab our camera now. And I'm just going to trim some of these a little bit. So again, the same technique. We're going to start from the left, and the leftmost pad is going to be the ground here. And I'm going to just wait for that. See, it's not really nice. I'm going to hold it there. Okay, hopefully that's going to be good. And then next we have 5 volt. So it's going to be this pad right here. I'm going to heat that up. There we go. And then we have our video. And there we go. So now our flight controller is completely ready. We really have nothing else to do because our video transmitter, and again, is going to be connected to the VTX right here. So we're going to find the small side. I'm going to plug that guy right in. And then we would install our video transmitter like this. And this is perfect. Not always you get them this perfect. So we lucked out with this setup here. So now our flight controller is basically ready here. So we can move along to the ESC now. So let's go ahead and grab the ESC and the motors as well. So right now we have the ESC in the correct place. Now the orientation of the ESC is very, very important. And why is that? Well, because the way the motors are routed. Because in beta flight, every motor has to be in a specific place. So for example, this would be motor 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's perfect. So this is the perfect way to set it up. Now if we set it up like this, our quadcopter would never fly. So keep that in mind. So this is the best way. The battery should be in the back. Now, if you know what you're doing, you don't have to do it this way. But if you don't know what you're doing, just stick to the defaults. You're going to be good to go. So, and again, now the first step I like to do is I like to add solder to every single pad here. Now we're going to skip a couple of them, but I'm going to do a couple with you as well, just to get an idea. Because these need a bit more heat. So I have my soldering iron set to 400 degrees Celsius, not Fahrenheit. So I'm going to hold the pad, heat it up, and then just keep bringing my solder until it melts. You can see how long it's taking for the solder to melt. And we just got to keep it there. Don't worry about ruining the board. It's going to be fine. These could take a lot of heat and a lot of abuse. There we go. You see how long that took? The other ones should start to get a little bit easier because the board's already starting to heat up. So this is really good heat dissipation on this board. This is going to be insane. Yeah, this is going to be slightly difficult for you to solder onto. There we go. Yeah, this is really good heat dissipation on this setup. That's a good sign. That's a very good sign, because you want the heat dissipation. You want these boards to stay as cool as possible. And as you can tell, the pad's heating up, but it's dissipating the heat throughout the board here. Boom, there we go. Did you see how long that took for me to get a proper soldering joint? So keep that in mind. Don't be afraid to hold it there for a while. And here we'll do one more again together. So I'm just moving the wires here. So I'm just going to hold the pad. I'm just going to keep doing this. And then, you know, just come in, add a little bit of solder. See, as you can tell, it's stopping because the solder is not liquefying. It's turning into a solid again because of the heat dissipation. These pads are dissipating all the heat very, very quickly. There we go. You can tell I'm even having a difficult time. So another recommendation would be possibly to increase the temperature. But if you ever do that, keep an eye on the tip of your soldering iron because it'll go black. So you're going to have to keep feeding your soldering iron solder so it doesn't go black. So if I leave this right now, for a while, the tip's going to go black, so I'll have to come in, add solder, clean it out again, just to keep it running well. So now I'm going to skip these right here and also the power, and then when we come back, we'll start soldering the motors here. All right, so now we have the ESC pretty much prepared here. Now also something to take note of when you're going to be soldering the power side or adding solder to it, which I forgot to mention earlier, is that they have something called vias, which are basically like holes. And if you keep the soldering iron on there for too long, everything will start seeping to the bottom. So keep that in mind. And if that were to happen, flip it over just like this, hold your soldering iron. I'll just right here, just keep doing that, and then it'll come back to the other side. For here, I'll just show you an example right now. I've also increased my temperature of my soldering iron more because it's going to need a lot more because the heat dissipation is really good on this board. So you just do something like this if the solder was on the bottom. And now if we flip it over, you can see that it's pretty much flat and everything just went up here. So keep that in mind. That's going to come in handy someday for you. Because even some ESCs on the pads, they also have vias, pretty big vias, which allow the solder to go through. So now we're going to set up our motor wires. Now it doesn't matter the orientation or the way we're going to install these. You're going to install them as you want, and later on we'll have to figure out if that's the correct way or not. And if the motor is not spinning the correct way, we'll get into that later. Then you want to just flip any two motor wires, and then it'll start spinning the other way around. So it's fine in that perspective. So right now we're going to grab the first one. Now I highly recommend you grab yourself tweezers because you're more than likely going to basically let go. And the problem is with letting go, if it gets too hot, is that solder would just jump everywhere. And if solder were to jump everywhere on this board, you should just basically throw it away. So keep that in mind. That's very important. So right now, and again, I'm starting from the left side because I'm right-handed. I'm going to heat up the pad, make it melt just like that. And then I'm going to bring in the wire and then just push on top of the wire. You'll hear this really nice crunching sound. And then make sure I'm holding. Make sure you have a firm grip with your tweezers before letting go so it doesn't move, and just hold there for a little bit, and then there we go. We got our first wire in. We're going to do a couple of these together. So here's another one. I'm going to just heat up the pad here, and then I'm going to bring in the motor wire. Again, just keep applying pressure and let go, and that's perfect. You also want to make sure you don't bridge anything, which is also, again, very important. And we're just going to zoom in a little bit more here for you. Here we go. Make sure you're comfortable. Make sure you're really comfortable when you're doing this, and make sure you have a good grip and solid grip with your tweezers. Now, I don't recommend you hold the wire like this. You want to hold it sideways, because when it's sideways like this, you can actually push down on it just like that, because when it's like this, it can just slip upwards. So yeah, that's what she said. You see what I mean? So so just be careful. Just hold it sideways like this so you can apply pressure. See how much pressure I can apply here? But like this, it's not really that stable. Plus, you're not in a really comfortable position. But like this, you could push down on it, which is something very useful. I watched my assistant holding the wire like this the other day, and that's where I noticed that some of you might be doing that. So here, it's going to be a little bit difficult to get a flat grip, because we have now the other wires in the way here. So, you know, we'll just try to go in an angle as much as possible. But make sure you have this thing squeezed and you're holding it as close as possible to the edge, which gives you better overall control and accuracy here. Again, we're going to heat up the pad. Just wait for it until we actually touch the pad. There we go. I felt that, you know, the solder melted enough to where my soldering tip was touching the pad down there. And boom, really nice. Really nice. All right. So again, we're going to do the same thing. I preheat the pad to make my life easier here. It just works a little bit better. Boom. Now you see how the solder was kind of all over the place. It seemed like it bridged both sides. Hopefully that's what you saw on camera. When I let go, it didn't. That's because all the heat was here and it just got sucked right into it. So just don't get scared. Just commit and don't do any sudden movements, and don't let go of the wire, especially with the tweezers. Just like wait a second or two and then let go. And there you go. And you get really nice results like this. So you can see that just looks really, really beautiful here. So that's coming out really great. So I'm going to go ahead and skip over the other side. It's the same process. And we'll come back and do the Xt60, because that's going to be, this is the most difficult part of this whole build. Once we finish this, we're basically kind of done, to be honest. So right now we're going to be doing the most difficult part of the build. Now I highly recommend you increase the temperature of your soldering iron to 450 plus, because this can get pretty messy sometimes, even for me. Because there's a lot of heat dissipation going on, especially with the ground side here. And also these wires are usually pretty big. The longer the wires, also the heat is being dissipated up. So it's acting like a heat sink. So it even takes longer for the wire to get hot and melt the solder to get a good connection. And not only that, on top of that, we're also going to have to add the slow ESR capacitor. Now, you know, if you're getting lazy and you don't add this, that could give you a lot of problems that won't be fixed. So I highly recommend you add it right from the beginning here. So the way to add this, we need to find the minus on this, which is going to be this leg, because since it's on this side. And we also need to find the minus on here, which is the ground. So we're just going to go ahead and we'll start with the positive here. As you can tell, I've kind of twisted the legs a little bit just to make my life just a little bit easier here. So I'm going to come in just very carefully. Now, as you can tell, I'm starting with the positive side. Now, there's a reason why I'm doing that here. And the reason is the positive is always much easier to melt than the ground. Because like I mentioned before, the ground plane is just all over the board. So the whole board acts like a heat sink. You can see that this is taking a little bit longer than usual here. Now the problem with doing it this way now is we're going to have solder flowing to the bottom side. So I got a pretty good grip. This is not a really great solid connection yet. And the reason for that is because we're going to bring in the wires here. So, and that's going to help a little bit more. I'm just going to add a little bit of solder on top, but I'm not going to hold the pad too much so all of it doesn't seep through. And if it does seep through, which I think happened here, since the motor's already into place, I will hold my quadcopter upside down so you're not going to be able to see it on camera. And then I'll just hold my soldering iron right on top of that pad and allow it to seep through to the other side. Just wait for it to seep through. So there we go. We got it in. The ground is going to be better because it takes a while for it to heat up, so it has a less probability of seeping through. And I'm just going to show you. As you can tell, with doing it upside down, everything is now on top. You can see down there, it's flat. So it's also a very important step because sometimes it can seep through the bottom and touch each other. As soon as you plug in the battery will catch fire. Everything here will burn. So yeah, just keep that in mind so you don't have a problem like that. So here we go. Now we have the positive. And again, I'm going to start with the positive because it's just so much easier. So let's go ahead and do that together. Now there's many ways to do this. I'm trying not to heat up the pad first. Just a tiny bit, just like that. And then I'll bring this in. And this is going to take some time. This is going to take quite a lot of time here. So as you can tell, I'm kind of rolling the soldering iron, and a nice technique also is to add solder, because the solder will also help the heat transfer and allow just the heat to get everywhere very quickly. There we go. Everything is falling down into place now. That motor wire is so freaking hot. It'll get really, really hot, so you got to be careful here. I'm not really satisfied with how it came out just yet, so I'm going to hold the iron just on there a little bit longer. Add some more solder. This is what I mean, it's the most difficult part. And then let go. Try not to move it. It's not really that clean because I'm pretty sure most of the solder dropped to the other side here. Oh yeah, this is really bad. Check this out. So this is what could happen to you. This is exactly what I was talking about earlier. Right there, look at all that hanging down there. That's not supposed to be there. Do you see that? That's quite a lot of solder there. So I probably shouldn't have added that much solder. So again, I'm going to use that same technique. I'm going to hold it upside down here. I'm sorry, you're probably not going to be able to see this because I need to let gravity do this. So I need to hold it down as much as I can. So right now I'm just touching the pad from the bottom here, trying my best to have it go through, and some of it fell on the pad below me. All right, let's see what happened here. You can see some of it fell right here. That's fine. Just don't make any sudden movements. Make sure the ground's not connected. Okay. Now you see this pad right here I use for all my videos. I'll have also linked down below. It doesn't burn, and it's just an amazing pad that I've always used. See? Just clean it off with water right after, and it's always like brand new. So I'll have this link down below. It's very useful, especially for this, so you don't burn your table, you don't catch anything on fire or anything. So, all right. So now we've done the positive. Now we're going to do the ground. The ground's a little bit, again, it's going to be a little bit more difficult here. So hopefully you'll learn some of these techniques. Here I'm just going to kind of heat up the pad slightly more. I'm not going to add that much solder this time. So we're just going to wait for this. And I'm trying not to forget my tweezers. There we go. You could hear this little crunching sound, a little crushing sound maybe. That's the word. Seems to be good, hopefully. I'm just going to add a little bit of solder here. You can see that my soldering tip again is also going black. That's because we've increased the temperature. It's oxidizing. There we go. Actually, the ground was easier than the positive this time. That's in really great. I'm not really satisfied that much with the positive, but this will get the job done perfect, so there's no problem into that. Do a little pull on them. Don't pull too hard because sometimes you could rip off the pads. So like this, we're done with the hardest part. Now the rest is going to work like a Lego puzzle. That's all we got to do. So here's the flight controller. And what's really nice about the flight controller, I forgot to mention, is it comes with all these screws and all these little rubber O-rings. As you can tell, I put 2 of the rubber O-rings down here. And then I put the flight controller, and these screws also came with the stack, which is perfect for this frame. And here are the soft mounts, which insert into the flight controller. Now we need to find the arrow here and point it forward towards the camera. Now this is where the camera is going to go, because I know that's where the camera plates go. And we're just going to install this just like that. And then that should be, we're basically done actually. Let's see what's next. All right, so once that's installed, I'm going to install my little rubber dampeners here, because we're also going to need double-sided tape for the video transmitter, because I'm going to put it on the bottom back there. There we go. And all of these little bits and pieces that I'm using here, from the gummies to this little white see-through plastic standoff here, or nut, it just comes with the stack, with the flight controller stack, which is again also linked down below. So it is a pretty proper package for 40 bucks. Not only you get performance, you get everything you're going to need, which is just insane. You don't want to tighten these too much, but you want to tighten them pretty good, because you want the dampening effect to also work as well. And you want to kind of also try to have them all be tightened exactly around the same amount here. And we'll come back to that later. So here we go. So now we have the receiver, which is connected. Now we need double-sided tape in order for us to install our video transmitter back here. And that's going to go in just like that. So now for the double-sided tape, this is actually a very important step here. You don't want to put the tape on this side. You actually want to put the tape here. It's going to be better this way because you don't risk the exposed copper areas to short out here, because that'll short out your battery voltage. That means that'll short out your direct battery input, which would be an absolute devastating nightmare here. So there we go. We got our double-sided tape into place. I'm just gonna I should have wrapped these wires. So it's really nice to twist these wires just like this. It makes for an overall better build, cleaner build sometimes. There we go. Right under the capacitor. The capacitor adds pressure. All right, so now our video transmitter is into place. Very nice, very secure also. All right, so right now I've installed the camera plates here, and the camera plates come also with a 3D printed part, which will allow you to choose between a micro-sized camera and also a mini. However, here we're using a nano, but this nano comes with a micro adapter. So that's why we're using this 3D printed part and also this adapter that came with this camera. So that's all set and done here. Now, next thing is we're going to go to the back here. Now, we still need the video transmitter and also our receiver set up somewhere. So for the antenna I'm going to be using this one right here. It's from UAV. It's called the AT2. I really wanted to try it, so I picked one up. It's also MMCX, so it'll connect right there, and I don't have to worry about anything. And the frame also comes with this flexible 3D printed part, which is very, very useful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my receiver just like this, and I'm going to flip it like that. I'm going to add these wires to be on the bottom here, and then I'm going to bring it in through this pouch right there. So we're going to install it in that pouch right here. I'd highly recommend you add some tape or something around the receiver, but I'll do that later on. So, and then I'm just going to slide this 3D printed part into the standoffs here, or yeah, the standoffs, and there we go. We have that set into place. As you can tell, it's levitated up, which is really great. Next, I'm going to grab my antenna for the video transmitter. I'm going to just stick it into that hole and just plug it into the MMCX back here. Now, remember something: never power on your quadcopter without having your antenna plugged into your video transmitter, or you can ruin it. So keep that in mind. Now we're going to go ahead and set up the receivers antenna, and let me put the top first, then we get into that. So once the receiver is into place here, the next thing we want to do is set up the antennas, because we don't want these hanging around, because they will get chopped off, and that will really ruin your distance and your range. So keep that in mind. So right now we're going to take both of these. As you can tell, I've installed these zip ties and I've cut them right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to follow along with this just like that, and bring in some heat shrinks. Now I'll have a link to the heat shrinks I use. I buy a pack and it lasts me like over a year with all these builds and stuff. So they're really great heat shrinks. We get a bunch of different sizes as well. So I'll have that link down below. So this is what I'm going to do here. This is kind of like the best technique. There's other techniques also to do this, but this is my personal favorite because it just works great and it gets me good distance. So there we go. We have that installed. Next thing we want to do is we're going to shrink that in a bit. I'll probably do that now. We'll just do this one together, and then the next one I'm just going to skip over because it's just the same process, nothing too crazy here. All right, and like this, we are basically done, and this thing feels so freaking light, but it's around 315 grams like this right now. Without the prop nuts also installed. So this is going to be a pretty sick build. Stay tuned for the flight footage. Now I'll have the flight footage in the pinned comments down below, so whenever you get lost or you want to see if the flight footage came out, it'll be updated in the comments down below. It'll be the first pinned comment, so you can go ahead and check that out. Also, I'll do the beta flight setup in a later video with the flight footage. And yeah, overall, this is how you'd build it. This was like possibly the fastest build I've ever done in real life and on the channel. And yeah, it was just insanely simple, and hopefully should fly pretty great. So stay tuned, guys. Everything's linked down below. Come join my Patreon because you'll also have a chance to win this and some other builds as well. And if you join my Patreon, you get access to my secret shop, and I also have some pretty awesome t-shirts. So come check out my shop at shop.dronemesh.com, and I'll see you in the next one, guys. Peace out.